The making of showbread. Leviticus chapter 24 verses 5 to 9, 1 Chronicles chapter 9 verse 32. Learn Bible with fun. On the Sabbath day the Levites made 12 loaves, or cakes, of unleavened bread. These freshly baked cakes were placed on the golden table of showbread in the sanctuary of the tabernacle and later the temple. Leviticus chapter 24 verse 8. 1 Samuel chapter 21 verses 3 to 6, Matthew chapter 12 verses 3 to 4. The loaves represented the 12 tribes of Israel, and in some translations it is called the bread of the presence. After a week, the bread was removed and eaten by the priests. Researcher Shelley Hauser shows the process of making showbread. Her research on the hin, omer, and ephah concludes that the recipe for the showbread in Leviticus chapter 24 is 8 cups, 960 grams, of wheat flour for each loaf. This would be 2 omers, or 2/10 of an ephah. Moses' base unit is the ephah, which translates into 10 US quarts. Leviticus chapter 2 verse 13 states that all grain offerings are to be seasoned with salt. Shelley writes, "I add 1 tablespoon of salt to each loaf. It is salted to my taste, as there is not a specific amount of salt mentioned in the Bible. The salt and the flour are mixed. Salt adds strength to the dough." In the recipe for the showbread listed in Leviticus chapter 24 verses 5 to 9, there is no mention of oil. When I baked a first set of showbread with just the flour, salt, and water, the resulting loaves were so hard, the priests could never have eaten them. So, I added 1/3 of a hin, 2/3 of a cup, of olive oil, the amount of olive oil specified for a ram offering. See Numbers chapter 15 verse 6. The oil and flour are mixed and then water added. When a white coating appears on the dough ball, and strings of gluten form, then there is enough water added. If you add too much water, it will be too sticky to knead. If you don't add enough water, it will be dry and crumbly, and the dough will not stick together enough to make the bread. The mixture is then needed to turn it from a clumpy, unevenly wet dough into a smooth, satiny ball. The Mishnah says the loaves were 10 etzbah long, by 5 etzbah wide, with 7 etzbah rims, horns. The etzbah is translated as finger width in Jeremiah chapter 52 verse 21. The standard finger width size, determined by engineering standards, is 0.75 inches, 19 millimeters. The Egyptian deben, or finger measurement, was 0.74 inches. Molds were made to shape the dough to this size. The Mishnah states that the loaves were molded into shape by 3 different gold molds, one while the loaves were just dough, another while baking the bread, and a third after baking, to protect the shape. Shelley adds, in this experiment, the dough was baked 3 hours at 300 degrees Fahrenheit, 148 degrees Celsius, but when I sliced the loaf, it was still a little wet inside, and probably should have been baked another half an hour or hour. 12 loaves were baked each week. The loaves are very dense, and need a long, low-temperature baking time. Pure frankincense was put on the loaves and in between the rows. Leviticus chapter 24 verse 7. Frankincense had the benefit of acting as a mold retardant. It may also act as a bug, rodent repellent, too. An example of a loaf that has turned moldy as a result of not having pure frankincense to protect it. Shelley suggests, the rims/horns on the top of the loaves may well have the purpose of holding the frankincense so it would not roll off the bread. An example of a 4-week-old loaf that has dry white patches inside but has no mold, due to the pure frankincense. The priest set the loaves after it had been displayed for 1 week in the sanctuary. A baked loaf was 10 etzbah, 7.5 inches, 19 centimeters, long. It was 5 etzbah, 3.25 inches, 8.2 centimeters, long, with 7 etzbah, 5.25 in, 13.3 centimeters, rims, horns. It was 7 etzbah, 5.25 inches, 13.3 centimeters, high. The 12 loaves, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, were placed in 2 rows of 6 loaves. Bread with these dimensions 36 inches, 91 centimeters, long, 18 inches, 45.7 centimeters, wide, or 2 cubits by 1 cubit, had the dimensions to fit on the table of showbread. In Exodus chapter 25 verse 29, God told Moses to make spoons and dishes to go on the table of showbread. Some of the dishes were called covers to cover withal. The dishes were to be made of gold, and this is Shelley's artistic representation of what some of the dishes and spoons and covers might have looked like. The finished loaves on the table of showbread in the tabernacle or temple. Here they are shown with the golden covers over them. A modern-day reconstruction of the tabernacle at Timnah in Israel. Subscribe our channel Learn Bible with Fun.